Words cannot adequately describe how fascinating the human brain is.
We know that the brain plays an essential role in some basic physiological processes. And we also know that the brain is responsible for all of the mental processes, cognition, emotion, perception, body movement.
But new research is exploring how the brain processes language in
the parts of the brain that support the semantic system, the word meaning, and on top of that, explore the kind of information that is represented in those areas to sort of dissect what is meaning made up of.
Discover how words and language meaning are encoded in our brain activity inside this edition of CTSI Discovery Radio. Welcome to CTSI Discovery Radio. I'm your host, Brian Belmer. CTSI Discovery Radio is brought to you by the Clinical and Translational Science Institute of Southeast Wisconsin. The CTSI is a consortium of researchers, doctors, scientists, and others representing 8 institutions, including the Medical College of Wisconsin, Milwaukee School of Engineering, Marquette University, the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, Children's Wisconsin, Froedtert Hospital, Versity Blood Center of Wisconsin, and the Zablocki VA Medical Center. The CTSI works collaboratively across all of our member institutions. Our mission is advancing health through research and discovery. The human brain is like an incredible supercomputer, combining both amazing capabilities to learn, retain, and share knowledge, and its many mysteries of exactly how it all works. Modern science is unlocking more of these mysteries through research. And on today's show, we'll discover a recent study exploring how words and language meaning are processed through brain activity. For this, we talked with one of the study's experts. Dr. Leonardo Fernandino is an assistant professor of neurology, biophysics, and biomedical engineering, and Vice Chair of Faculty Affairs and Development in the Department of Neurology at the Medical College of Wisconsin. We began our conversation by asking Dr. Fernandino how much science understands about how our brain works compared to how much we don't yet understand.
That is a really good question and difficult to answer because it's very difficult to estimate how much we don't know. The brain, compared to other organs in the body, is more complicated.
Still, he says, there's plenty that is known.
We know that the brain plays an essential role in some basic physiological processes, body temperature or regulating your heart rate, your blood pressure, metabolism. And we also know that the brain is responsible for all of the mental processes, cognition, emotion, perception, controlling your body movements. All of that happens in the brain.
But even among what is known about brain function,
we know much less about this latter aspect, the cognitive functions of the brain, than we do about its physiological functions.
This is due, in part, because
for physiological functions, things that we share with other animal species, we can study mice, rats, and because we have access to this type of animal experimentation, that allows us to understand these aspects that we have in common with those animals a lot better than aspects that we don't.
So, when it comes to studying cognitive functions like memory, language, or emotions, it becomes
very difficult, if not impossible, to study in a mouse or in a rat. You have to rely on experiments provided by nature, such as when someone suffers a stroke. You can study that person to see how the stroke, how damaging that part of the brain affected their behavior. What is it that they were able to do before they're not able to do now? And we can use non-invasive techniques and make inferences about how those processes are related to cognitive processes.
As a researcher, Dr. Fernandino is excited about what we do know about the brain, but also
I am excited excited about things that we know that we don't know. I think that's the best way to put it. For example, our brains are able to do certain things like communicating using language and extract information from text or from language that you hear and turn that into ideas, and do the reverse, take ideas and encode them into language and then express them via speech or via text. These are some things that we know the brain does.
What isn't fully known is how the brain does these things.
There are clues that point to mechanisms that may be going on and allows us to glimpse how the brain may be doing it, and then do experiments to try and test these ideas and try and advance.
To further illustrate this, he borrows an analogy from renowned planetary scientist Carl Sagan.
What we know scientifically is like an island surrounded by an ocean of things that we don't know. The ocean around you will always be much bigger than you. And so your goal as a scientist is to be able to expand that area of knowledge, and based on what we know and the techniques that we have to generate knowledge, we can project where we think we can add more land here or there. I think that's exciting. There is water over here, but I can foresee how we can turn this into land.
Dr. Fernandino's area of expertise and research is in cognitive neuroscience.
Cognitive neuroscience is the branch of neuroscience that studies mental processes. Things like memory, perception, language comprehension, action control, as opposed to, let's say, behavioral neuroscience, which studies things that you can easily study in non-human animals.
Within cognitive neuroscience, his focus
is what I call semantic cognition. The processes involved in generating meaning from language and from things that we perceive in our environment. You see a cup of coffee and you understand that that's a cup of coffee. That's a semantic process. It matches some kind of template in your memory of all the cups of coffee that you've seen, and can retrieve those memories to give meaning to that particular cup of coffee.
So, to sum it up,
when you hear a word and you're able to understand the meaning of that word, meaning generate an idea that is associated with that particular word form, this is what we call semantic cognition, and that's the area I specialize in.
Knowing this, does he focus on the entire brain or specific regions of the brain where these cognitive functions take place?
Cognitive neuroscience tends to focus on processes that happen primarily in the cerebrum of the cortex, which are the two hemispheres that sit on top of the whole thing.
Here, Dr. Fernandino gives us a little Brain Anatomy 101.
The brain does have many different parts. Anatomically, it's a very complicated structure. So if you follow the spinal cord into the skull, on top of the spinal cord, there's a bit of brain called medulla oblongata, and then on top of that, there's a bit of brain called mesencephalon or midbrain, and on top of that, there's another part of the brain called diencephalon, and then on top of the diencephalon, you have these two hemispheres that include the cortex on the outside and the subcortical gray matter, which are bits of brain underneath the cortex but above the diencephalon.
Got all that? Yeah, me neither. But don't worry, there's no test at the end. For his research, Dr. Fernandino focuses on
more the cortex than the subcortical gray matter regions. These areas are the ones that most cognitive neuroscientists focus on.
Why is that? Why these specific regions of the brain?
A lot of cognitive neuroscientists are particularly interested in mapping functions in the cortex. This thin layer of tissue that is on the outside of the brain that forms those crests and valleys when you're looking at a picture of a brain. And there's something really interesting about that, because to the naked eye, the cortex seems to be the same everywhere around the brain, in the front, in the back, on the sides, in the middle. But those areas, they don't do the same thing. They're specialized for different kinds of computations, so to speak.
And as a cognitive neuroscientist, his work
is to try to map functions onto that cortical surface and determine which areas are involved in processing vision, processing hearing, integrating visual information and auditory information to generate higher order representation of the world, which areas are involved in connecting that to the motor cortex, which controls your movements of the body, which areas are involved in making decisions, and so on.
Dr. Fernandino recently conducted research on how words and language relate to the physical world we experience. He tells us, going into the study, it was already known that language utilizes two distinctly different kinds of mental representations.
There are basically these two kinds of mental representations that support language. One that we call phonology and has to do with representations of specific forms, the physical forms that we use to convey meaning. It can be the sound that characterizes the word, or mouth actions you need to perform to produce that word, or the written form of that word. And so we have parts of the brain that specialize in combining these different kinds of information together, sound information, vocal articulation information, and combining all that into these phonological representations that store speech sounds, letter sounds, syllables, and words. And that is your library of word forms.
Which is to say, phonology is the means to communicate. Then there are the ideas our words communicate.
And that is part of what we call the semantic system. So a word like dog is basically a sound that is associated with ideas. A particular kind of animal has particular properties. We know they can bite. Some people use them to hunt and so on. So all of that is information in your semantic system.
These two systems can be damaged independent of one another. So, if a person's phonological system is damaged,
they can still think very clearly like everybody else about things that they want to say, but they're not able to say it because there's no phonological word forms that they can connect that to express.
Conversely, if a person's semantic system is damaged, it will
impair your ability to have ideas about certain kinds of things and affect your ability to access the meanings of words. But your ability to perceive and to produce words is intact. For someone who has damage of this type, you can give them a word and ask them to repeat the word. They can do it. But if you ask them what the word means, they won't be able to tell you what it means.
What then was the objective or goal of his team's study? What's unknown that he hoped to discover?
We were trying to understand the parts of the brain that support the semantic system, the word meaning. First, which parts of the brain do that? Which we had some idea, but the technique we used, we were able to see that with a lot more high definition than previously. And on top of that, explore the kind of information that is encoded, that is represented in those areas, to sort of dissect what is meaning made up of. Those are the questions that we were pursuing.
Who participated in the study?
The participants were all healthy volunteers from the Milwaukee community. We basically advertised the study with flyers in the schools, coffee shops, internet, social media. People who are interested in participating, they sign up. They do a little interview. They have to be speakers of English, and they have to not have neurological condition or damage and have high school level of education, so they recognize all the words we present to them in the study.
As far as what study participation involved,
they come here and they go into the MRI scanner. They spend a couple hours there looking at words that we present to them on a computer screen, and they have to make a decision about how familiar each of those word meanings is to them. That's basically what participants are involved in.
As mentioned, this study utilized functional MRI technology.
Magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI, allows you to image soft tissue very well, and used as a kind of high-tech X-ray that generates images of your organs and allows you to image soft tissue, unlike X-ray, which is good for seeing bones and tough tissue.
What then is functional, or fMRI?
Functional MRI is a type of MRI that, instead of focusing on the structure of the tissue, it focuses on the amount of oxygenation the tissue is receiving from the blood. In the brain, when a particular area in the brain becomes more active, when the nerve cells there start working harder, oxygenation in that area increases to provide energy to those cells. And that's what the functional MRI detects, is that increase in the oxygenation of that area of the brain, which is then a proxy for how active that area is relative to the rest of the brain.
How advanced is this technology today?
When we talk about the resolution of a picture, we talk about pixels. And the smaller the pixel, or the larger the number of pixels, the higher the resolution. With MRI, we talk about voxels, which is the three-dimensional corresponding to a pixel. It's a 3D cube of space. And the smaller the voxel, the higher your resolution. The current resolution of functional MRI we have here at the medical college is around 2.5 millimeters on each side, which is a very small cube. That means that each area of that size in the brain can be measured independently. The whole brain will have hundreds of thousands of pixels, and you can detect simultaneously how active each one of those areas is.
In addition to pixel size, there are other factors,
such as how fast can you take a picture of the brain? Because since mental processes are things that happen over time, what you want to do is see how those mental processes, as they change, how brain activity changes over time. So you want to take several pictures of the brain to make a movie out of it. And the faster you can take pictures, the more frames per second you can have in your movie. When I started, the best you could do was around one picture every 3 seconds. Now we are down to a little over a second, so almost 3 times faster.
Translation: fMRI offered awesome resolution in picking up activation patterns in the brains of study participants.
If you just look at the images, you see a grayscale image of the brain. Some pixels in your screen will be a little brighter than others. And that gives you information about current activation in each of those areas compared to some baseline that you're comparing that to.
Dr. Fernandino further shares what he saw in the brain scans taken of study participants.
For each pixel in the image, and compare that pixel activation when the person is seeing words compared to when they're laying in the scanner without seeing any words. And then you do a statistical task when you compare the activation in that particular pixel between these two conditions and see if during one of those conditions it is statistically more active than in the other condition.
And when that's the case,
then the computer colors it. And so when you do that for all the pixels in the image, then what you see is a colored picture, basically maps the level of activation across the brain with different colors. And that's what usually gets reproduced in textbooks, those colored maps of brain activity.
But these maps are more than just pretty, colorful pictures for science textbooks.
It's important to understand what you see in those images. You're not seeing brain activity itself. What you're seeing is the result of a statistical test that the researchers did, and they're color-coded such that the more statistically significant the signal is in that area, the brighter the pixel or the point in the image. You can code it so that the higher the significance, the more it goes from red to yellow.
Does he see similar or identical brain activation patterns between study participants when they see the same word or concept?
If you have one person over the entire brain, you see patterns that are different for different words. And words that have more similar meanings, those patterns are more similar when you look at the same person. But every person's brain is a little different. And so when you compare the brains of two people, even images from the same word, from the same concept, will be a little different in those two brains. But when you average that activity across a large number of people, then you can get a group-level map that is characteristic of each word. And then in that case, you also do see differences between word meanings and the activity patterns we see.
What were the key findings of this study?
What we found was that there is a set of brain areas in different parts of the cortex that together these areas are all involved in representing word meaning from a wide variety of kinds of words. So all of these different kinds of concepts get represented primarily in a set of cortical regions called the semantic network.
And within this semantic network,
we're able to find which areas of the cortex encode that semantic representation and tell that the information in those areas encodes experiential sensory motor information generated by the visual part of the brain, the auditory or hearing part of the brain, the area that processes touch, the different specialized areas that process the different perceptual modalities.
Then, the The information saved in these different areas gets combined
into what we call multimodal representations. So they are more abstract representations that include information about color, shape, texture, size, temperature, sound, and so on. And that's what the concept looks like as far as the brain is concerned.
Dr. Fernandino says this research
opens the way for trying to understand in more detail how the different sensory systems contribute to these multimodal representations. They don't all contribute the same amount, and so that's something that we can explore. To what extent does each sensory modality contribute to semantic representation, whether this is different for different kinds of words,
with the hope of eventually being able
to decode this activity by measuring activity in someone's brain when they're thinking. We might be able to decode that activity and find out what it is that they're thinking about,
which could have profound impact and applications, especially
for people who suffer from brain injuries that prevent them from being able to speak, like those patients who have a damaged phonological system due to stroke. So they can think, but they can't speak and they can't understand speech. So it's a very debilitating condition because it isolates you from the rest of the world.
And so, by being able to decode a person's brain activity into thoughts,
we can help these people to be able to communicate again.
But there are limits, because when it comes to our central nervous system,
the brain tissue as well as the spinal cord, they do not regenerate. If you have damage to that tissue, it never regenerates. That is one of the great challenges in treating neurological disorders or neurological injury, because the brain doesn't heal in the same sense that the liver heals. So when the tissue dies, like when you have a stroke, if you treat the stroke right away within, say, 15, 20 minutes, and those regions, they don't die, they recover. But if too much time goes by and those cells die, then they're gone forever. And function they support is lost unless they can be taken up by other parts of the brain that have the properties necessary to learn that function that was lost.
If you want to learn more,
the website of the DANA, D-A-N-A, Society for Neuroscience, and the Society for Neuroscience, those are two of the best resources that I know of.
He's being modest because he also hosts an awesome annual event that we'll discover next. But first, Dr. Fernandino reminds us just how special our brain is.
The brain is the source of our mind, and our mind is the most precious thing we have. If you lose your mind, you lose everything.
In the time we have remaining on today's show, we're excited to offer Dr. Fernandino the opportunity to share details about a free annual event held at the Medical College of Wisconsin, where you and your entire family can learn about the brain, neuroscience, and a whole lot more. It's called the Brain Expo, and Dr. Fernandino first tells us that
the Brain Expo is a science education event dedicated to bridging the gap between the average layperson and the academic community, people like me who work in the labs and are helping advance knowledge in science.
He further explains,
we organize an exhibit here at the Medical College that has several different sections with different themes, but they're all around neuroscience, and it's open to the public. So anyone can come while it's open for the whole day on a weekend in April.
Hosting the Brain Expo is a collaborative effort.
Most of my colleagues who help me organize the whole thing are in the Department of Neurology. But we have colleagues in the Department of Neurosurgery, Biomedical Engineering, Biophysics, Cell Biology, the Neuroscience Research Institute, the CTSI. So all of these departments and institutes contribute to the Brain Expo. And so they help us plan, they help us host the event.
It's a big event, requiring the help of many.
Each event takes about 50 to 60 different volunteers to host and set things up. So it's a very large collaborative effort.
Next, Dr. Fernandino shares some of the highlights at the Brain Expo.
We have lectures by some of the faculty here, and we have doctoral students and medical students and other researchers who are hosting all of the different exhibits and talk to the visitors and answer their questions and provide demonstrations of things like how brain cells work, how the different parts of the brain perform different functions.
Then there are activities at the Brain Expo to challenge your brain.
We have games, we have puzzles, we have illusions, visual illusions, auditory illusions of all sorts. We show different equipment used to record brain activity.
It's an all-day, all-brain-related event for people of all ages.
People usually have a lot of fun. They bring their kids, they bring their grandparents. It's really a family event, and I feel like most people get the experience that we intend, which is to experience science on a first-hand basis, talk to people who are actually doing the science, and develop a sense of community among the people who are hosting the event from all different departments at the medical college, people who never met each other before the event, and incorporating the community into this experience.
So it truly is an event for everyone.
We organize field trips from elementary school children, 6, 7-year-olds, all the way up to their grandparents, and there is no age boundaries. Sometimes even preschool children come, and we have things for them to do, and they end up having fun.
And it's not just learning science on a first-hand basis. It's also learning about the brain on a hands-on basis. After all, what's a Brain Expo without, well, brains?
We have actual human brains from deceased donors that people can look at if they want to.
So attendees of the Brain Expo can actually hold a human brain in their hands?
Yes, they can. If they want to put on the latex gloves, they can hold it up.
Yeah, hard pass. But are there that many people who want to hold a human brain? You'd be amazed.
Typically, the people who come, they run and get in line right away because that's the first thing they want to see you do. We actually have to make extra room for the lines for those people who want to see the real brain. It's the biggest hit of the event.
For some, maybe, but not for people like me who like to avoid long lines and holding human brains. For us,
we have plastic models for people who don't want to look at real brains. There's lots of different plastic and resin models that people can pick up. And then you can bypass the line altogether.
Dr. Fernandino stresses everyone, including himself, will learn something at the Brain Expo.
So if you are at all interested in understanding a little more about how the brain works, this is a great event for you.
The date for Brain Expo 2025 has not yet been determined.
It should be sometime in April, and we will post that on our website as soon as we decide.
You'll also find information and links on our CTSI website, along with the podcast of this show. But for now, that's all the time we have for this edition of CTSI Discovery Radio. As always, thanks to our guest for appearing on today's show, Dr. Leonardo Fernandino. I hope you've discovered something by listening to today's show, and I'm doubly hopeful that you'll join us again next time. CTSI Discovery Radio airs the third Friday of every month. Make an appointment on your calendar and join us for each episode. On behalf of the Clinical and Translational Science Institute of Southeast Wisconsin and all of our affiliate partners and members, I'm Brian Belmer, wishing you happier, healthier days ahead. For more information about research or to listen to the podcast of this or any of our shows on demand, please visit our website at ctsi.mcw.edu. CTSI Discovery Radio is written, produced, and hosted by Brian Belmer in collaboration with WMSE Radio. The CTSI and this program are under the direction of Dr. Reza Shakir.